Hello there and welcome. So in this video, as it says, we're going to look at the question of crossing the line. And in everyday discussion and use, that generally means we've overstepped the mark, we've gone across a boundary that we shouldn't have done, we've possibly upset someone or caused a problem. And in motorcycle riding, I'm going to look at exactly the same issue. We're crossing that centre white line on the road. Do we actually cross the line? Do we commit offences? Do we put ourselves at risk? Is it something we should not be doing? So in looking at this issue, there's a few things we need to consider to start with. That is a little bit of legislation. We're not going to get into a big talk about law, and also the highway code. So there are three bits of legislation that spring to mind immediately when we talk about central road markings. The first is Section 2 of the Road Traffic Act 1988, dangerous driving. Then you get Section 3 of the Road Traffic Act 1988, which is careless driving. And then there are legislation pertinent to particular road signs and road markings, such as a solid white line. At the moment we can see we have the long lines with short gaps. They are hazard lines. They warn us that there may be a hazard present. Sometimes I come accompanied by a different road sign just to reinforce what that hazard is, although the hazards may be multiple. So when we look at dangerous or careless driving, there can be many things that a vehicle operator can do to fall foul of that legislation. It's very varied, and the highway code can be used as guidance in determining whether an offence is present, whether someone is guilty of those offences. So the highway code talks about centre white lines, and we can see here we have a solid white line. Now this has its own specific legislation. You must not cross or straddle it if it's nearest you, unless some of the exemptions of the highway code apply, such as you wish to turn right to a side road or adjoining premises, or if there is a pedal cycle, road maintenance vehicle or horse-drawn vehicle travelling at 10 mile an hour or less, and it is safe to do so. So we know that the broken white lines, the short white lines with the longer gaps, they're just central road markings. The highway code goes on to say about the hazard markings, it says do not cross them unless it is safe and you intend to overtake or turn right. Now we're going to look at the reasons why we might want to cross centre white line in more details as the video goes on. And it's important just to have a little background of it, because I have heard recently that one of the police forces in the UK is telling motorcyclists that if they do cross the hazard lines, they're leaving themselves open to potential prosecution for the offence of Section 3, careless or inconsiderate driving. But there are times where we do need to use that other side of the road. And when we look at various training methods, things you see out on the internet now, various trainers discussing certain things, you'll see there's a lot of mixed messages coming out about what is and what isn't appropriate. So first of all, if you are a new rider and you're doing your test, you will generally be expected to stay on your side of the road unless it is a must to use the other side of the road. Musts might be going past parked vehicles. Now we've got parked vehicles here. I've got plenty of space, so I can stay within my own boundary of my side of the road. But sometimes you may need to just go across a little bit to keep away to prevent the doors from opening. Or you might just be safer having that extra space. Now that's no big deal to cross the white line to do that. It's not an issue at all. I mean, sometimes it's absolutely necessary. So you have to use the other side of the road here to be safe. That's just the way it is. And they're hazard lines, so you know we can cross them because I need to overtake stationary obstructions. So when we're looking at road positioning, there's several issues that we need to consider. First of all, safety. Is it the safest place on the road, or at least does it afford us a good level of safety? That's primary. We must never compromise our safety for any other advantage. Does it give us good stability on the road? Now, it might sound obvious that stability and safety are so closely linked, because if the bike is unstable, surely you're compromising your safety. But there are circumstances where you may have to have a slightly less stable road surface to achieve your safety in other ways. For example, going around a blind corner on a cracking piece of road with the potential of hitting an oncoming vehicle, or staying on your side of the road and being on a wet, muddy piece of road. We also look to improve our view, so do we get an earlier and a better view by positioning on the road? And do other road users see us earlier? Do they gain a better view so we're not hidden away? Because we need to be seen and we need to see what we're doing, of course. And another issue could also be the smoothness of the lines that we take. And in considering what we do on the road, there's another little acronym that we use. I have used it before, and that is SLAP. S, is it safe? L, is it legal? A, does it actually achieve anything? And P, what is the perception of other road users? Now, when we're talking about using the other side of the road, they're all very important. There's no point being across that white line when the oncoming vehicles think that you're out of control, or you're a vehicle from abroad who's forgotten which side of the road we drive on, and they start taking evasive action and you cause a problem. And it's alright you going, I know what I'm doing, it's absolutely fine. But if they perceive that you don't know what you're doing, it's not absolutely fine at all. So the main area that I'm looking at in this video really is what we call offsiding. Now, offsiding, if you don't know, is a term used, and this has been trained by the police for many years and many advanced post-test organisations and instructors. It's where you approach a left-hand bend and you want to carry more speed. So to do that, you move out, very often crossing the white line, getting a view across the other side, from the other side of the road. So the limit point moves faster, you get an earlier view, you can carry more speed, and your line is smoother. So it's perfect for making good progress. So this technique has been frowned upon a lot in recent times, and the reason being is that the technique is inherently risky, because you've got to have a real good understanding of what you're doing to do it. Now, some people say it's absolutely fine. Why not? You overtake, you use the other side of the road, so why not use the other side of the road to choose the advantage of going a little bit quicker and having an earlier view? And of course that's arguable. But when you think that a certain police force has been telling motorcyclists they could be prosecuted, we need to refer back to the Highway Code. Now, the Highway Code makes no mention of doing such an act, and at the end of the day it wouldn't. And the reason it wouldn't, I presume, is because all riders in the eyes of the law and all drivers in the eyes of the law, once you have a full licence, you are equal. It doesn't matter how much advanced training you've done. The driver who passed his test this morning, in law, is required to drive at the same standard as someone who's been doing advanced lessons for 30 years. There is no differential in law. So why would the Highway Code say it's okay to use the other side of the road to gain advantage to go around the left-hand bend faster? It just wouldn't. And that's why it's omitted, no doubt, which gives the police the option to say, well, it's not in the Highway Code, it only says for overtaking or turning right, and you're not doing either. So technically, you're up for a due care, Section 3. But when we look at Section 3, driving without due care and attention, it would say that where a person drives carelessly, inconsiderately, or their driving falls below the expectation of a careful and competent driver, they could be guilty of an offence. Now, my argument is that if we are going to cross that white line on the approach to a left-hand bend, if we are indeed not careful, not competent, inconsiderate, absolutely right, we have to be guilty of an offence because we're not doing the right thing. But what if, as a rider, by putting myself out there, I have assessed all the risks, my knowledge and understanding is such that there's no way I'm going to fall foul of any other road user, there's no junctions, there's no issues whatsoever. Is my driving below the standard of a careful and competent driver? Or is it in fact a standard of a very careful and competent rider? Now, I've had to change the route that I was going to take because the road's closed. So that brings me on to the subject a little bit earlier, of country roads, single track roads. Are the same rules going to apply on a single track road that they do for a wider road that has white lines on it? And I would suggest it's going to differ slightly. You can see here I'm actually on the other side of the road, and when there's nobody else about and you can see that there's no entrances and driveways that could cause a problem, and someone's not going to suddenly come round the bend and you're going to be on the other side of the road, it's not really much of an issue. And because there's no solid or hazard lines in force, really there's no legislation covering that. So we're just purely back to section 2, section 3, aren't we? Are we careless or are we dangerous? And one of the reasons that we might wish to use other bits of the road that aren't technically ours is for stability. We talked about stability earlier on. Now today, you can see it's pretty wet. There's still leaves, despite it being January, there's still leaves on the road in places. There's mud, there's twigs, because we've just had some very heavy winds. Quite a lot of trees have been down. And the question is, do I want to be leaning my motorcycle over at some nice tight angle to get round a corner on these sort of roads? And of course the answer is no, I don't. I want the motorcycle to be as stable as possible. So to keep the motorcycle as stable as possible, it needs to be more upright as we can. Now, motorcycles don't corner very well by being upright. So we are very often going to look at using a straighter line than maybe we would on a fantastically dry, good road surface. So like here, you know, can I straight line the bend? So you could just sort of sneak over and pinch another bit of the road if necessary. Keeps the bike more stable if you were going quicker. Not very necessary at a lot of speeds. And it's like here, I'm very close to the white line, the hazard line, not committing any offences, but if I stay there and a vehicle comes the other way and we collide, I'm certainly guilty of an offence because I'm pretty close. And I think it's one of the mistakes I've seen quite a lot in advanced training, is that riders will very often put themselves out to the other side of the road to open that view up. Just like here, I've got a view. It's fine if you've got a view, because you can see that it's safe to be there, providing you've taken into account all other factors. But as I say, one of the big mistakes that I see, is people put themselves out when they're approaching a bend and that view is not opening up, or that view is very short. Bottom line is, be aware of where your limit point is. If that limit point is closing on you, or the distance already between you and the limit point is short, you should not be going out to the offside, even tight on the white line in your own lane, for a better view. But if you have a nice long view, you can already see that lorry coming towards me. I'm just going to ease off and keep well out of the way to the left because he's wide. If you've got a nice long view and you can see that it's clear with no other hazards, then of course to extend that view may be beneficial to you. So with the right hand bend here, I can work quite nicely in my own lane. Now that's a bend that I could have straightened, but I've got oncoming traffic, so I'll clip it to the white line, but I'm not going on the other side because one, there's no real need, and two, there's oncoming traffic. As we look at this left-hander, certainly can't be across the other side of the road. It's got a reasonably good view that's opening up a lot of the time, but yeah, I held that view. Wasn't keen to go on the other side because I didn't feel it was necessary, but I could hold what you might call a position 5, and it's the same with this left-hander here. Now I'm getting closer and closer and closer to the limit points, and now the view opens and I have to come back in for the right-hander. Just clipping the white line there to smooth that bend. Offside position because of the junctions. View is maintained, so it's okay to be here. Can't clip that bend early because the view was concealed by the hedges, and quite rightly so. There was a van. No need to straighten things out. Grounds of safety. So just for the ease of riding, there were considerations of using the other side of the road there just to keep the bike more stable. Now, because of the traffic queue and the very slow agricultural vehicle ahead, we're thinking about overtaking. So the question arises, if I can use the other side of the road to overtake, why can't I use it, if it's safe, for any other purpose? I.e. general riding in a smooth straight line. And the answer could be because it's unnecessary. And because it's necessary to use the other side to overtake, but it's not necessary to go around a bend. It's worth just mentioning, as we're coming along here, you can see that we've got hatchings, road hatchings, and they're to protect the vehicles turning right at the junction. And it's worth just referring to the highway code, rules 127 to 130, if I remember rightly. Road hatchings, where they are surrounded by broken lines, you shouldn't go in there unless it's safe to do so, basically. But if they are bounded by a solid white line, you must not go in there unless it's an emergency, and that is covered by legislation in the same way that the solid white lines down the centre of the road are. So just always be cautious about riding on hatchings if you're going to. As I say, solid white line shouldn't be on there. Broken white line is always a possibility, but remember you're putting your tyres on lots of road paint which could be slippery, and on some roads these hatched areas actually accumulate quite a lot of debris that is pushed into the centre of the road. So another reason to be a little bit cautious of crossing the line onto hatched areas. Now it's quite windy today as well, and there's another reason to consider not travelling too close to that white line in the first instance, because if you get a gust it could take you across it. Now I'm just going to pop out for a little view. There's the view. Alright, we'll have one. So using the other side of the road across the hazard lines there just to gain the view. I didn't have the long view till I popped out. I had enough view to have a view, but I didn't have enough view to overtake until I was actually out there. So that worked quite nicely. Had no intention of overtaking until I'd confirmed my view. Just like here, we can see right the way through there. Nothing wrong with the bit of the other side of the road there, just to straighten the line up. And it was done early enough that those oncoming vehicles are probably not even aware of what I've done. It's also necessary to check your mirror before you do that, because if you've been very engrossed with what's going on up the road ahead of you and fail to notice what's happening behind you, you suddenly start going across the other side of the road, and if someone overtakes you, you're in trouble. Every road position change should be preceded by a mirror check, at least some form of effective rear observation, so you know that you can do what you actually want to do. Now I'm very aware that there's all sorts of debris on this road today. There's stones, twigs, wetness, and even the road sign there warning us, slippery road surface, you know, so we're not going to cane it, we're not going to go daft. So look at the view across there, you can see the road surface. Straighten it, open that view up on that bend. There's no hazard lines here, there's no lines at all, and then when it's necessary just come back to the centre. In those circumstances there, I can't see what's wrong with it at all. I've made lots of assessments, I'm not affecting anybody, I'm not compromising safety. It's not an issue. So it's like here, it's a little bit, but of course that view's not fabulous around the bend, so we don't want to be too keen to get across the other side of that road. Definitely smooth it there a little bit in the 50. Not necessary technically, but certainly safe. It's like here, holding a position, ready to move away more near side if I need to. Junction there, so I'm going to come away automatically just in case. I'm going to reassert my position back towards the centre line, opening that view up. As long as the eyes are well up and that limit point's moving, we're not doing too badly with it. We can just see the junction there and the oncoming vehicle. So I'm going to come back to a more neutral position. I want to be on the centre of the road at that point. And we can see that the road is bending to the right. So I'll position left for view and consider straight in the bend across if I need to. There's the view, don't need to. And we can see the road bends left there by the field and the tree line. We don't know how deep the road dips, so we can't assume it's safe to move out for an offside position. And we've got a junction there, so it's been completely unnecessary and actually not safe. Yeah, views there, so we can just smooth that bend a little bit. Now be very careful when smoothing right-handers, because if that curb line, that verge line on the offside is deep, it can actually conceal vehicles in certain instances. I'm sure there's a video out there I've done already that illustrates that point. It's like here we can have that. Now you can just see that oncoming car. So I'll hold the position as long as it's safe and then just smoothly return to my side of the road. There's no drama with that at all. And you've got a left-hand bend here, slight bit of dead ground, but I'm just clearing that now. So I could offside a little bit here and then bring the bike through the bend. Consider smoothing the right-hander, eyes up, but the view's not braking, so we can't. There's the view, driveway junction there, so not going out there. Glancing across, we can see where the road goes, but we can't see the road surface, so no way will we be putting ourselves on offer on the other side of the road, and it's completely unnecessary. Just like there, you know, we can smooth it a little bit and use a little bit more traction because the bike's upright, use a little bit more acceleration. You know, if you think back to the tyre grip trade-off we've spoken about before, we don't want to be putting acceleration down with the bike at lean angle. It's much better to get the acceleration down with the bike upright because the tyres have got more grip. You accelerate too strongly with the bike leaning over and you're going to step that back wheel out, the tyre's going to lose its traction. So they're technically a little bit of offsiding, just using the road to my advantage. When we talk about road positioning and stability, you can see where the hedge has been cut recently. We can just see that flashing amber beacon. We can see a lot of debris on the road. And you can see there that by overtaking that vehicle like I had to, put me on the other side of the road and at quite a low speed. Now in the normal course of events, I would not position myself there to offside to get a better view around that left-hand bend. But in the circumstances, I actually had to use that road space. But I think we have to be very cautious how we train people. And whilst we've already said the law makes no differential between a driver holding his full licence for a day or 30 years, even if he's done loads of advanced courses, the reality of course is people's abilities and understanding do vary massively. I think that's very much the danger of online training videos, is lack of understanding and lack of guidance, mentoring, when you're actually out there on your bike thinking, I've seen that on YouTube or whatever platform you've been watching, I'll give that a go. And if you're not getting it quite right, and if you haven't fully understood it, there's no one behind you going, right, we need to stop doing that now, you need to come back to your side of the road, or let's debrief that, let's look at that. So if you are building up a habit of a certain way of riding without any form of mentoring, it could be quite unhelpful to you. It could be quite dangerous. But it's certainly worth the discussion in the first instance. There are many people that will watch this or will say generally, don't offside, don't use the other side of the road, not necessary, don't do it, end of. We don't need a discussion. I think we do need a discussion, because people are going to do it and it has a time and a place. When we just say don't do it, we're not discussing it, or don't do it because it's dangerous, what we're not doing is actually visiting the understanding of it. And we can very often de-skill people. I think it's one of the risks that we get by not training people properly, constantly reducing speed limits and just treating everyone as if they're daft. But people that choose to enhance their training, their skills, their knowledge, their ability, they shouldn't be treated as daft. And just to say don't do it because it's dangerous, I mean, I've heard very often, you know, position 5 that was used in some training areas, which is exactly where I'm sitting now, on that white line. Don't sit in position 5, it's dangerous. Well, I'm there now and there's no danger whatsoever, and it's like position 1. I'm over there now because of the parked car and the bend. People have said to me, position 1's dangerous, you don't use that. There was no danger there at all. I wouldn't encourage a brand new rider to get very close to the near side verge, nor very close to the white line, because they're not ready for it. But you can't tell me it's dangerous in its own right, because it isn't. It's dangerous in circumstances, but it's not dangerous as an absolute. And good training will always take into account a wide range of factors such as ability, experience, knowledge. I think it's fair to say that generally speaking, when we look at the practice of offsiding purely to gain more speed as a non-emergency services rider on normal roads, it's just not necessary, and the risk does probably outweigh the reward. So I hope this video has been a little bit useful in some ways, just to raise the issue of offsiding on the approach to left-hand bends and smoothing out right-hand bends by using the other side of the road, and just a little look at what may or may not be legal and what the highway code says. We're very interested in any comments you've got. Please leave them as always, as you often do. So until next time, ride safe and take care.